All right, we are at the top of the hour, so we will kick things off for our second session of the day. Our speaker today is Dr. Allison Hall, who's the Director of Learning Experience Transformation at Arizona State University. And Arizona State has been such a tremendous partner as we implement Canvas and certainly through our teaching efforts as well. So thank you for all that you all do to support us. The session will be moderated by Dr. Beverly Irby, who's the Regents Professor and Associate Dean for Academic Affairs in the College of Education and Human Development at Texas A&M. Beverly is also a member of our LMS Advisory Committee as we transition to Canvas. Just a brief bio on Allison. She's the Director of Learning Experience Transformation in the University Technology Office at ASU. Allison is a connection point between the Learning Futures Collaboratory and the Learning Experience team, helping to bridge the gap between the future of learning and how to bring these practices to scale for all learners. Prior to her leadership role at ASU, Allison worked as an instructional designer in both the higher ed and K through 12 spaces. And I had a chance to speak with Allison a couple of weeks ago, and it's just fantastic to have a couple of thought leaders who are a couple of weeks ahead of us in terms of implementing all of the technology in the classrooms, as well as shifting faculty into some of the best practices that we will invoke in the next coming weeks. Allison will present, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end of the session, which Beverly will lead us through. The session is being recorded, and we'll post the links to the recording on the Office for Academic Innovation YouTube page in the coming week. And then if you'd like to ask questions, we're using the Twitter hashtag #TAMU_BigSplash, or you can email us at academicinnovation@TAMU.EDU. And if we don't get to your questions today, we will, in the coming days, find a way to get a response to you. So with that, Allison, we'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here at the Big Splash. This is a very exciting event, and I feel where you're coming from, and I'm so happy to be here to share what we've experienced at ASU and any tips and tricks to help you on this journey as we enter this nebulous fall 2020 teaching experience. And so we have been working with faculty this summer, getting them trained up and prepared for fall. And as Jocelyn said, I do come from K-12, where I worked with schools that were going one-to-one, where all the students were getting technology. And so, which is a similar mental shift for the educators, where all of a sudden teaching as you know it has changed overnight. And it's scary and exciting, and we're going to explore some of the possibilities of what that could look like today. So as we go through things, I'm going to share with you some theories and thoughts, as well as some practical tips. I look forward to your questions. And so I'm going to share my screen to get started here. And I'm going to start with a little practical tip right now. So I love using Google Slides, and part of it is because of the presentation options. And so I just wanted to show you, before we just entered presenter view, you can show your full screen, but this presenter view button comes with some pretty awesome features, where you can have a Q&A that's running along. I'm not going to leave this running because we have our own Q&A system, but what that does is it puts an ask a question URL up on your screen so that your students can ask questions. It's kind of a nice alternative to just going through the Zoom chat, because they can upvote and you get a nice collection of the questions at the end. So I just wanted to share that feature. The other thing that's nice is it has this automatic captioning that works fairly well. It's not 100%, so it is not suitable if you have students that need accommodations. Consult your disability resource center, or whatever the organization is called there at Texas A&M, to assure you're meeting all of your students' needs. but I just wanted to share a couple of those practical tips that might be helpful when you're presenting in Zoom. So let's get into things. Today, we're going to talk about ASU Sync, and I'm going to share with you some of how we're managing having some students remote, having some students that have a desire to come back to campus, and the same thing with faculty. Some faculty wish to return, some faculty wish to remain remote. And so I'm going to share with you how we're doing that through ASU Sync. We'll talk about managing stress because, you got to put your own mask on before you can put on the mask of the person next to you, right? Airplane rules apply. So as you're entering this 2 days of getting tons of information, take it one piece at a time. Try to just take one thing away from every session or just every day, and be kind to yourself. And we're going to talk about centering our learners and putting them right up front, making sure their needs are met, and how to put Canvas to work so that we don't have to work so hard, because it really is a great tool to help us out with that. So a little bit about ASU is our charter is very important to us and core to who we are, and we're very much measured by whom we include and how they succeed. And so when this shift to respond to the pandemic and shift to remote learning happened, we were very cognizant of the different ways that our learners and our faculty were impacted by that shift. And ASU Sync was a direct response to that, to try and find a way to personalize the learning approach so that we can meet everyone's needs and everyone has the opportunity to succeed in whatever capacity that might be. The challenges: we have over 100,000 learners. We are at 4 campuses in the metropolitan area of Phoenix. We also have a 5th one in Lake Havasu, and we also have satellite locations in Washington, D.C. and London. And so that's a lot of very diverse needs. So ASU Sync, the idea is to offer combinations of campus and digital immersion to reach the best of both worlds. Because as we're looking at this, our president, Michael Crow, really emphasizes that, we're not waiting to return to normal, we're creating the new normal. And so if we can take this as an opportunity to move forward and advance education and improve things for faculty and learners, the better. Let's do that. And that is what we believe we're doing with ASU Sync. So it is very similar to what Jared was talking about this morning in a high flex model, where it's offering opportunities for live interaction, but it's also flexible to the fact that sometimes, especially at this time, we're not going to be able to be live in the traditional sense. And even remotely live, it's going to be challenging. We're going to have family members to take care of. We might get ill ourselves. Our students might need to work more to help, supplement the family income, be taking care of family members. So it's really important to be flexible. And then to continue the forward progression of learning in supplying experiential and personalized ways to continue progress and move forward. So what this looks like is students might join a Zoom session either in person or remote, and instruction can happen as normal. So we can have our lectures, we can have increased interaction through some of our technology tools like Canvas. And students are also going to be able to work together in small groups, attend office hours as they normally would, and have those real-time discussions. And a lot of times when we think about live interaction and synchronous interaction, we think of face-to-face, but a lot of that can be also done digitally through discussion boards, through shared Google Docs, through Zoom chat and Slack chat. We use Slack as well. And so providing those opportunities for social connection with each other as much as possible while we might be physically distanced. And so logistically, what this could look like is we are absolutely following the social distancing norms. So we aren't going to be able to fit a traditional size class into a classroom. All of our classes over 100 people have been moved to a fully remote version of Sync. So there's online components that are asynchronous in Canvas, but there's also Zoom meetings such as these. But for our smaller classes, we've redistributed it into the rooms, some of those smaller classes into the larger rooms to allow for more distancing. But still, we're trying to stay, below a 50% capacity in the rooms to allow that distance. So for a faculty and a student, you might have half of your class on a Tuesday be in person and the other half attending remotely via Zoom. And then on Thursday, having that switch or having it split along thirds for a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And so that is some of how we're maintaining our distance. And we've released some community of care kits with masks, sanitizer, thermometers, and we are doing some contact tracing through our mobile app to be able to track and monitor our student and faculty interactions in person. And so over this summer, our amazing classroom technology team has been very busy updating rooms on all 5 of our Valley campuses. And they're coming through in 3 different models of Zoom rooms. One is enhanced, where there's a camera in the front and a camera from behind, so that it captures both what the instructor is showing on the screens in the room and also showing what's happening with the students. We have a Zoom equipped room, which is for our largest rooms, where it's a camera from the back. And those are both able to zoom in on the whiteboard, share the doc cam, share screens, monitor breakout rooms and chats. And then our third is Zoom Mobile. And that is for our classrooms with the most flexible needs, our art studios, dance studios, our labs, where you might have to get in a little closer, or there might be a room where it's just physically not possible, to install a built-in camera. And so those are cameras on tripods that can be placed in one section of the room, and they'll be monitored with a technology assistant. So those are kind of the logistics of how we're doing Sync. So in order to support students and faculty in this, we're putting some tools into their digital backpacks. So for students in their backpack, we have Zoom, Slack, Dropbox, and the Google Suite as authentic tools that, beyond their time with us at ASU, as they go into the workforce, these are our most common tools that we're hearing about from employers that students need as they enter the workforce. So into our Canvas connections, we are using these tools to support student learning and get them that education before they leave their time with us. In the faculty backpack, we have many tools, but the real trio that we try to focus in on, especially as we're just getting started, are Zoom, Slack, and Canvas. Zoom, it facilitates that, traditional lecture interaction, our conversations, putting a face to the voice that we're used to. Slack has been invaluable as a communication tool to have those asynchronous, synchronous conversations where you can easily toggle in between. And really, Canvas, in my vision of this, is the backpack. So if in the student backpack are Zoom, Slack, Dropbox, and Google. Canvas is the actual backpack. It's that one-stop shop of go into your Canvas, you'll have access to all these tools, your assignments, you'll be there. You'll be able to revisit directions and instruction, lectures, and interact with your classmates and your instructor. So now I'm going to share with you some top 5 tips to prepare for fall 2020. The challenge with a shift like this is much like what we're talking about providing for students with ASU Sync. It needs to be personalized, and that same personalization has to extend to faculty. Everyone's coming at a different level. You have a different subject matter. If you're doing humanities versus science versus math versus dance, you have different priorities and different needs. Not to mention your teaching experience, if you've been teaching a very long time, or maybe you're new to the classroom, and also technology experience. You know, are you comfortable? This is great. I have no problem just pushing buttons or figuring it out. Or every time I touch technology, it breaks. Like, the full spectrum is covered, right? And so as we're trying to help faculty prepare, we put a lot of information out there, and it can seem very overwhelming. And so again, if at any time you feel overwhelmed over the next 2 days, it's perfectly normal. And just take a breath and pick one thing. And so these are just 5 tips. Take what you want, leave what you're not ready for, or which you don't think is applicable to you. That's perfectly fine, not hurting my feelings. But these are things that I've seen not only in this switch because of the pandemic, but also in helping faculty shift to online learning and helping, you know, K-12 instructors integrate that technology where, you know, every 6-year-old in kindergarten showing up with an iPad all of a sudden. You know, these are common things throughout all those scenarios that I have found to be helpful and that are also based in the research. Because one thing is, this might seem very sudden and experimental, but a lot of this is not new. It's been happening for a very long time. There are universities that have done HyFlex for quite some time. So there is quite a bit of research, and Jared covered a lot of it. It was very exciting to watch his keynote this morning. And I'm sorry if you experienced some overlap, but it was like, hey, we are on the same page. So you might hear some things repeated, but that's just because they're really true. And hopefully that reaffirms it for you. So the first tip I want to talk about is letting go. Something I've heard a lot through the spring and the fall, and even as recently as yesterday, is I can't start doing anything until I know exactly what's going to happen this fall. And if there's any way to let go of that, please do, because I think it's going to be a very long time before we exactly know what's going to happen this fall. I think we're going to know exactly what's going to happen this fall in January 2021, to be honest, when it's in our rear view mirror. And that's scary. And so be kind to yourself. And a lot of, you know, as you're going through this shift, it does mirror the stages of grief. The life that you've known, the way you're used to teaching and interacting with your students as you know it has changed. And it's okay that process, and be scared and be angry about it and have all those feelings. But the key to overcoming and moving past it and continuing forth for your students and yourself is resilience and flexibility, right? You're strong, you can do this. Be kind to yourself, be kind to your students, you know, try and think through those mindsets. And controversial take, have some empathy for your administrators too, because, you know, this isn't easy on anyone. And to just prepare to be flexible, prepare for everything to change. And I know this is not very tech focused, this tip, but I think it's an important mental mindset to be able to move forward and move on with things. And I'll share this deck with Jocelyn to be shared out with you. But this link that I put in, one of the things we've tried to do to help faculty is we've started collecting stories of remote resilience, where things seemed insurmountable. Classes such as one of the stories is about a gardening class where they come together. It's part of biology, and they construct a garden. It's part of our, I believe, biology and sustainability program. And so how do you do that distance? And so just some of those examples can be helpful to see how other folks are handling this. Moving on, as you, tip 2 is to focus on learning and focus on your learners, right? It's taking it to the core of education. What do you want them to learn? How will you know that they learned it? And what will you do if they don't? If you anchor in what your learning outcomes are, I want them to learn this day. It might not look like what you've done in the past, but that's okay. It opens you up to what is really important here. It's this learning outcome. And with this, I'm going to add a couple extra slides before we go on to tip 3, because part of that focus on learning is focusing on the learners. So really thinking about your different students and who they are, what their needs are, and what additional challenges they're facing for this pandemic. Another resource I want to share with you is from our Starbucks Global Academy partnership. It's tobewelcoming.com. And this is a series of modules looking through the eyes of different learners and the challenges that they face. You do not have to be an ASU employee or a Starbucks employee to take these learning modules. So if you go and want to engage and log in and check those out, just feel free to do so. You do not have to be a Starbucks or ASU employee. They're really some eye-opening resources. Another thing we're really focusing on is universal design for learning. And so rethinking what learning looks like based on your learner needs and those learning outcomes. So that might be providing materials in different formats. If your routine was to lecture for an hour, twice a week, maybe there's a reading that is better, maybe chunking those, conversations into 10 minutes and then slipping in a little assessment of, hey, are you with me? Are you still learning? Are you still out there? And thinking beyond traditional measurements of assessment. Does it have to be a proctored exam, or could it be something more authentic to their learning environment? And maybe a proctored exam is authentic. And to just really find different ways to motivate learners and make them meaningful. And so core to that is communicate early and often to students. That's the number one piece of feedback we received from the spring, is to reach out to students before that first day of class, to really connect with them, make sure they know how and where they're attending class, how to access their Canvas, and put a little welcome announcement in there. Welcome to the class. Here's the things you need to know to get started, and open up a community forum discussion, which is a discussion that just remains open through your course, so that folks can ask questions at any time. Tip 3, remote first. One of the things that was so stressful about the spring was being caught unaware shifting to remote. Well, we're planning for in-person, sections. We don't know what's going to happen this fall. And so you're not losing anything by going ahead and putting things into Canvas. It can also help pull back on that Zoom fatigue, right? So that your students can access, materials right when they need it on demand. And so thinking of what are the strengths of your live classes when you're meeting live, what is the most important thing? What can't your students do without you? And if it's something, if they're, if it's handing out a reading and they're reading it, that's probably doesn't need to be a Zoom meeting. That's something that you can put up in Canvas. So as you're looking to what to shift remote, that's an easy entry point, is to look at your course materials and what don't they need me for? I can put that up in Canvas and then they can access it on their own. The other piece of remote first is when you do have those live sessions, to one of the logistical things about having some students in person and some students remote is your in-person students have the advantage, right? They have you right there. They can interrupt you. They can raise their hand. They're very, they can stay after class. They're in your face, right? And so as you're doing your sessions, you want to keep an eye on your remote students in the chat. And we advise to give the remote students the right of way. That they get preference, because as soon as that Zoom's over at class time and the next class has to come in, their time is up. They're going to reach out to you via Canvas or, whatever format of communication you choose. But in that time, take those questions, make sure to reach out to the online folks for questions. And as Jared talked about, have a little increased wait time to give them time to find the button to raise their hand or find the way to unmute or type their question in that chat box. Number 4, use your team. I've been fortunate speaking with Beverly this morning and earlier with Jocelyn. You have such a phenomenal community of support around you. So it's another points of connection while being physically distanced is you do have a fantastic team. I was pouring through the LMS.TAMU.EDU website yesterday, and it is chock full of wonderful resources and trainings. So make sure to reach out to faculty, have those conversations. How are you handling this? This is going well. This isn't going well. Reaching out to your LMS team. Hey, I want to be able to do this. I can't figure out how to do it in Canvas, right? They have, it looks like there's the virtual office hours and trainings. And also your students, it's okay to show a little vulnerability and be honest with them, where being a learner is part of being a teacher, right? And so asking them for their feedback, what they see is going well, if they have any advice, even if it's, hey guys, I can't find this button. They're a valuable resource. So make sure to use your team that's available to you. And the final tip is kind of looping back to the beginning, is change plus one. And I've said it a few times today, but change, you're having a lot of change, right? Choose what's most valuable for you and your students. It might not be the same as your colleague. That's a question that we've gotten a lot from faculty that are very anxious, is ASU Sync should look the same for everyone. And I'm doing it this way, but my colleague's doing it this way. That's okay. You have to do what's right for you and your students. So choose wisely, change one thing at a time, assess, did it work? Did it not? Why? Why not? Was it just a bad day? Try it more than once. Don't write something off because, somebody tried it, it didn't work for them, or I tried it this one time with this one class, really see what works for you and repeat. It's kind of putting your researcher hat on as a teacher, right? So with those top 5, I'm going to wrap up with a Canvas quick start top 5 to go along with that of okay, so I'm mentally prepared, I'm ready to use my team, I'm ready to hop into Canvas and put my remote students first, because it benefits everyone with that, universal design for learning, what you want to think of, what are the things that are benefiting everyone. And so this list, you might look at it and you're like, well, that's just a list of Canvas features. That's not very exciting. And so here's why. Bear with me. So the number one thing is get your syllabus in Canvas. And I'm sorry, Canvas team, I don't use the syllabus tool. It's not my favorite because I have some troubles with I build things into my course and then I might not end up using them. And so I'm not necessarily talking about the syllabus tool, but put your syllabus that you'd normally use in Canvas, right? Even if we went all back in person tomorrow, that's super valuable. There's no more, I lost it, I couldn't find it, I wasn't there at the start, could you print me another copy? Just have your syllabus up in Canvas. I also like to turn it into a module where I pull it apart. We have to put so much in our syllabi that, they can be bloated to like 30, 40 pages really fast, right? With all the regulations we have to put in there. So breaking it up into a few module pages helps students to actually maybe read it and click through all the pages and at least get their eyes on things. And then ending that module with a syllabus quiz where they can't go on into the course content. You can set your requirements so that they have to complete and pass that quiz before moving on. And then in that, I'll put, I understand things are due on this date and time. I understand the late policy. I understand the expectations for attending class and communication with my faculty member. Because, you can pick one form of communication. I want everyone to email me through Canvas, but you're still going to get random emails. We all know this, right? So just having that little extra bit in there is helpful. With announcements and discussions, I do try and filter all my communications with my students through Canvas so that I've got that record there. I know exactly what class they're from. Because when they send you emails through Canvas, you know what class they're coming from, right? It helps with that conundrum of, receiving that late night email and it's like, I don't know what class you're in. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what assignment that is. So it just kind of backfills a lot of that information for you and the student. And also, when I'm getting a lot of the same questions, I'll either put out an announcement, hey, everybody, this is what's happening, instead of every single, managing every single communication that comes in. And I also do that with discussions. I talked about setting up just a discussion that lives as a community forum. And that's super valuable for the students to connect with each other and to ask you questions because if you have a question, it's likely 20 other people have that question too. Modules, when I encourage faculty and I myself, I like to keep my navigation very clean. And so in Canvas on that left side where you've got, syllabus announcements, modules, pages, quizzes, discussions, I take it down to just announcements, modules, grades. And then any other feature tools, like I might have a link to my Zoom or something. But I take it down to those three and then filter everything through modules as an organizational tool for myself and the students. When you have discussions or quizzes, a lot of times they'll just click on it and maybe they haven't reviewed the pages or the learning assignments that are associated with those quizzes. It just creates confusion. So I really encourage you to leverage those modules. Assignments, in the fall, at the end of the term, I saw someone walking across campus with a dolly full of boxes. And they were student assignments. It was after the last day of class, it was during exam period. And that was he was returning all his written assignments. It was about, 5 boxes worth stacked up on a dolly. You don't have to live that way. Use those assignments. It clarifies expectations. It removes excuses for I didn't know, I wasn't there, I couldn't turn it in. And it helps your students just have that consistency of, okay, here's the rubric, here's how I'm being graded, here's exactly what I need to turn in. And we both have clear communication about if it's turned in or not, and makes it a lot easier to turn around and get back to them to help with that learning cycle. And the last thing is something that Jared talked about, is to use quizzes as, quick formative assessments. They don't have to be long, big exams. It can be just a short, hey, thanks for coming today. Here's one question, and it's auto graded. You put it in there ahead of time, but it gives you and the students an understanding and feedback of, did we both reach the same learning experience today? Were we successful together as a teacher learner duo? So those are my 2-5 tips for Canvas and for just life in general. And here's my information. I'll leave it up for a second, and then I'll stop sharing the screen, so that we can just have a conversation as we do questions.
I need to unmute myself. Thank you so much. Thank you, Allison, for that very valuable information. I do have a few questions that have come in, and I would like to ask those for our audience. One is that has just come in is about when students are in class, both face-to-face and online at the same time, are all students signed in for the online session regardless of their location?
That's an excellent question. And the honest answer is it's up to the faculty and the student. In my opinion, it's nice if they are, because then you can do breakout groups, because one of the things that we're very concerned about is we have a large international student population where they are not going to be coming back into the country right now. But if all of a sudden they did and they show up in the classroom, we want our remote and in-person folks to have that relationship. So if you do have your in-person students also logged in, then they have that ability to interact, to chat, to join the same breakout room together. But again, it might not be what's best for your class and your students. You might have students that don't have access to the technology, but even if they can join on their phone, so that's something that is a good idea to poll your students about at the beginning of the semester is, privately, will you be bringing technology to class? Is there something that can be done with that? I know for us, we're distributing, some technology through our library to help, with that equity issue. And so I would inquire what that situation is there. And also what we're finding is it'll help with some of our classes that have been running already, is having them logged into the technology will also help the in-person students communicate with each other, because at 6 feet apart and then a classroom apart, it's hard to do group work. It's hard to have those conversations. So
Yes. So I have another question that's just come in. So how do you suggest we manage groups? You just mentioned that across Sync, and strictly to keep the students in groups and based on their delivery, or try to mix them, or how do you mentioned it a little bit in your talk, but how would you suggest that we might manage those groups?
Great question. And one of the things that Jared showed in his keynote was the Canvas grouping, where you can have within Canvas your students in groups so that they're the Monday group and the Wednesday group. And having that form to communicate, it gives them not only that you can communicate separately with them and it's very clear what group they're in, but also forming groups gives you a space in Canvas where they can collaborate and chat just within their group. And so that's very handy for synchronous, not Zoom interactions, so that they can still have that connection and be together as a group without, you know, necessarily being in class or on Zoom. And as far as the in class, I think that pairs well with the technology question of, I feel if they're able to log in, it can help with that communication. But there's also, you could group just the in-person students and then have the remote students grouped in a breakout room and just not interacting with each other as much. And that's just fine too. There's other ways for them to interact as a group.
Excellent ideas. Thank you so much. So I had a couple of other questions that came in. What advice would you give us? Now, you've given us some tips, and I loved the 5 points, and then about the Canvas, your 5 points on that about using it. But just sort of thinking about it holistically, what advice would you give us as faculty as we implement something similar to the ASU Sync here at Texas A&M, and as we move into the fall and begin this work?
So from the big picture perspective, I would say from the big picture perspective is that change plus one. You know, be empathetic to yourself and your students. Don't try and do everything all at once. It'll be stressful for you and for them. And to just go into the semester knowing, everything might not be perfect, and that's okay. Learning and growth is often messy. And so just go in with, I'm going to change one thing. I'm going to put things, I'm going to put these things that are super easy for me in Canvas, and just forgive yourself if there's, things that are just too hard right now.
Yes. I think that's very, very important. It's, it's sort of a scary time. And although, I think that we can challenge ourselves and we can stay the course and we can create this time. And I think that it's an exciting time as well. Thank you so much. Another question that just came in. Do you have advice on how to handle audio feedback when multiple people are in the same physical room and also on Zoom, or I suppose they're talking about their remote? How do you handle that?
Yeah. Setting expectations online in the physical room are, just as important, if not more important than ever. And that's a huge part of classroom management in this new time. And so I was just in a Sync classroom yesterday, training our student workers who are going to be assisting with that connection. And I had some folks in the room and some remote. And so one of the things is right up at the front of class is say, if you're going to be joining us in the Zoom, one of the first screens you get is join by audio, and it asks you if you want to join, and tell them no, please do not join by audio, or be using a headphone, so that will help with that feedback. Mute your computer, right? And so that might be a good primer to put into your Canvas shell, before you come to class for the first time. Here are the things to think about. If you're going to join, mute your microphone. If you're in the class, mute your device. Be wearing headphones, kind of those elements. And something that I've also experienced is very valuable in setting expectations that isn't feedback related, but it kind of is to set expectations for your chat. Are you going to be monitoring the chat and actively answering questions? Some folks, find the chat very distracting. So maybe you want to turn it off for some times and strategically turn it on. Same thing with the microphones. And so those are good things to get together with some friends and practice and try it out. See, how all those buttons in Zoom work.
Excellent. Excellent. It's sort of like when we're in a face-to-face class, we sometimes at the beginning of the semester, we set class norms, we together.
Yes.
So this is what you're talking about, basically. There are some classes we would have. So that's great. Thank you so much. So I have just a couple of other quick questions here. So what issues have you faced or what issues occur when syncing in your courses, when we come together?
Yes, when we come together. Actually, a lot of the things we've just talked about are kind of the biggest pieces are those logistical things. And part of that being kindness is, we're with the having folks in the room and having some folks remote. I feel like every time we're learning what we don't know. And, you enter a class and it's like, all right, I've got my norms set. We've got our mics off, and then something else happens. And so I feel like, rolling with those punches of and just being transparent about like, that's not how I expected that to work today. Okay, let's pivot. Main tenet of teaching is monitor and adjust. And so
Exactly.
if it's not working, don't feel the need to stay the course. If and it's an interesting thing working with folks that do predominantly online versus folks that doing in person. Online folks are much less used to that. Whereas in your classroom, I think we've all been in a class, where it's that discussion went sideways or
Right.
that experiment didn't work out. And it's the same thing with this is, things are going to go sideways, unexpected things are going to happen. And so
Exactly.
just
And
stay
a
flexible.
question, Allison, on that just came in. And do you have advice for faculty who may not get the chance to test out newly upgraded classrooms? You mentioned your classrooms there at ASU and how lovely they are. And what do faculty do when they may not get to the chance to test out the newly upgraded classrooms with technology to help ease our anxiety as faculty members?
100%. Even, our team, our classroom technology team is working with our vendors. It's over 1,000 classrooms, over 5 campuses. They're still working, and I think are going to be working hard on getting those in place until day one. And some of our faculty are not going to get into their classroom to touch those buttons ahead of time. And so I would use that first class, you're going over your syllabus, you're getting to know each other. You know what? I'm also going to be pressing a lot of buttons today. We're gonna, setting that expectation of, okay, this is a learning day. This is my first day in the room, and we're gonna press these buttons. And let me know, for your online folks, can you still hear me? Be checking in with those remote folks. Can you hear us? Can you see this? And getting that feedback from students about what is and isn't working, and just being transparent about, it's day one, and that's okay.
Well, we have a few more minutes. Thank you so much, Allison. And I have a few more questions, and I think this one is important. Um, did you require or include a mechanism for attendance? And how is this done with the two sets of students? I think what the person is talking about is the face-to-face, the remote, or groups.
Absolutely. So I'll give you two versions of answers, and I'll give you the one I think that's wanted first, which is you can technically with Zoom, you can download those participants and save your chat afterwards to see who's attended physically, remotely, and then also have your traditional method of taking attendance in class. If you're used to doing a sign-in sheet or passing something around, you probably don't want to do that because of health restrictions. But so it might just be more of a verbal call and response. And you could even do that with your remote students as well. But on the other side, I think, this switch is a chance for us all to Marie Kondo our teaching and learning and hold things in our hands. And does this benefit our learners? And does this help us learn and bring us joy or not? And I think attendance is one of those things. The reason why we love attendance is, the research shows students that attend more achieve better. But at times it can be turned into a punitive measurement rather than, hey, this is an assistance with learning. And especially in this format, you're going to have students that can't come because they're ill, a family member's ill, they're taking care of maybe younger children in the home, maybe they have to work. There's a lot of different things that could be at play. And if the heart of attendance is learning, then I would make attendance a learning measurement. So whether it's just a small formative assessment, just a one question quiz, throw an answer to this question in the chat or respond to this poll, and then taking that, physically from your in-person students, or they go home and respond to the question, because what's important is the learning. So, and we have one of the links is to our teaching toolkit page on our Provost site. And we have a toolkit for creative ideas that might be not the norm for taking attendance. And so we have a lot of resources on that site, like how do I do group work? How do I do peer review? We included script of this is what you can say to the class, or paste this into Canvas, and these are your directions. So
that's great.
Publicly accessible. Yeah.
Thank you, Allison. I have one more question, and that'd be our last question. We have to answer this pretty quickly, but
okay, I'll go fast.
Yes. So would you talk about how you are encouraging your faculty in the classrooms to navigate teaching with face coverings or face shields? And what about engaging students who will also be wearing the face coverings? So that'll be our last question.
All right. So I have been on campus a few times over this summer and working with folks and trying out what it would be like to be in the classroom with, folks with face coverings and communicating. And it was interesting to me how quickly I kind of adapted to just speaking louder and enunciating more clearly. But of course, that's not going to be perfect, especially if you have a very large room where we have microphones that are lav mics that are attaching to help with that and help with the vocal cords as well. And there was a very good article that just recently came out in Inside Higher Ed that some experimenting with that I think is a great resource to read about their perspective. So no concrete answer on that one, but we'll all do the best we can.
That's right. That's another one of those, let's take it as it comes and work through it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you, Bev. This was fantastic. I've gotten a lot of emails from faculty as we've gone through the session saying this was really helpful for them. We'd also like to make sure we thank our partners in the event, the Center for Teaching Excellence, Disability Resources, Provost Communications, Provost IT Office, TTVN for allowing us to live stream today, as well as Canvas and LinkedIn Learning. And then, of course, a special thanks to our LMS Advisory Committee members, which, Bev, you are certainly one of those in your ongoing commitment to Texas A&M as we transition into Canvas over the next year. We'll be sending out a quick survey in our emails to come, and we hope that you'll provide us some feedback. And we have our next session starting at the top of the hour, 11 a.m. Central, where we will hear from faculty who use Canvas in summer 2 at A&M. So that will be a fantastic session to join. Thank you again, and we will turn things off.
Thanks so much for having me today. Forks up, Aggies. You got this.
Take care. Bye.